Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Melissa Mullen with Beck Technologies Marketing Department. So great to have you all here. Super excited to get this going. I'm here today with Brent Pilgrim, who is the DESTINI Applications Director at the Beck Group. We're going to be talking today about one of his initiatives that he started. So, estimating with BIM Task Force, which is headed by the BIM Forum. And we're just going to be talking about that as well as some trends that Brent is excited about as we start going into 2021. And with that, Brent, I'll let you take it away if you want to share a little bit about yourself before we get kicked off.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I'm with the Beck Group. I'm our DESTINI Applications Director, which basically means I oversee the implementation of our DESTINI platform. So DESTINI Estimator, DESTINI Profiler, those tools, and just help to make sure that our teams are getting the most value that we can out of those platforms, and that we're pushing the envelope. And we want to always be innovating and kind of leading what we're doing with those tools. So that's kind of my role. I've been with Beck for 20 years, believe it or not. I have to pinch myself every now and then when I say that, just to make sure, am I missing something there? But I started with our construction group. I wanted to come to work for Beck right out of school because of the integrated model that we've been using for so long. And I've been able to participate in that model. I worked with our construction group. I moved over and worked in our architecture group for a few years. Worked on some integrated projects, and then, as you know, I've worked with Beck Technology for several years and spent some time really diving deep into the technology. And I wanted to bring that back home to the Beck Group and help implement that and use that. So that's where I've been for the last 5 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. With that being said, want to start out by asking you, so, the last time that we talked and you were on a webinar with us, you were telling us that you saw a need for increased standards and guidelines for working with BIM models in the world of estimating. And you were starting that initiative that we just mentioned, Estimating with BIM Task Force, which is underneath the BIM Forum organization. So can you talk a little bit about, what inspired you to start that initiative? And then can you kind of update us on what's happened since then?
Yeah, I'd love to. How much time do we have?
30 minutes, Brent. Remember that.
No, I'd love to share that story because it's something that I've been passionate about, and really that passion is just growing. But what inspired this initiative from me was that I had been performing model-based estimating for 13 years using DESTINI Profiler. And all of a sudden I was on a project where model-based estimating was being asked for, and the process just kind of fell apart. It just didn't work. And I couldn't understand why that was happening. And so something that felt so second nature to me, because I've been doing it for so long, felt so impossible to implement, so to speak. And now, to be sure, there were some major differences in what I had been doing with Profiler for 13 years and what we were trying to do on this project. But nonetheless, it still was kind of confusing to me, like this doesn't seem like it should be that hard. And so I wanted to try to pinpoint where the differences were in order to resolve them. And after some reflection on what we were doing on that project and kind of figuring out where the challenging points were, I realized that with Profiler, I was doing model-based estimating in a very controlled environment. With Profiler, there were some curbs and boundaries put in place. There were some guardrails put in place that where I was the model author and the model estimator both, this came very easily and solved itself very easily. So I realized that was really the key to my success with Profiler. But I still didn't understand why we couldn't take the concepts that made Profiler as a platform successful and then replicate that with other systems, other software, other platforms, other teams. So what I realized is when you break out of these fixed systems, teams are basically left to create, custom routines and workflows to respond to the whatever the model information that is being fed to them is. So an analogy would be like, we build this assembly line that's automated, and it's built to receive these certain parts and pieces that are the same quantity, the same shape, the same frequency every time. And then all of a sudden you take this cardboard box of nuts and bolts and you dump it on the conveyor belt. You can see how it would wreck the assembly line, right? It's just not prepared to handle that. So that's kind of the analogy loosely that I would use to explain what's happening there. So the industry is that assembly line, and it has no scalable or replicable workflows to rely on and depend on that's going to come down the line when it comes time to do model-based estimating. So I realized really quickly I had a kind of an epiphany as a result of that experience on that project. And I said, look, if we could create a standard for model-based estimating, then we could scale it, we could replicate it across the industry, and it wouldn't be just confined to these firms like Beck, like so many other general contractors who are doing model-based estimating successfully, but to try to take those processes and scale them across the industry just wouldn't work, because they've come up with custom ways to do this, to deal with the information that they're being fed, so to speak. Does that make sense? And so the other thing I wanted to try to do as part of this exercise was put some definition around model-based estimating and 5D, because the industry looks at, when you say I want to model-based estimate, some people just automatically think 5D. And I look at those as very different workflows. Model-based estimating is kind of the entry level to 5D, but 5D is a much more value-added process, if you want to call it that. And really is the key to what I think we ought to be, that's the goal that I think we as an industry ought to be setting, is to try to achieve 5D, because we have so much to gain from it. Once 5D is put into place, it means we've got a process that we can rely on. It means that there's some standards in place, there's some consistency, no matter who the model author is, and we can start to build on that and scale from that, if that makes sense. So this led me to thinking about a way to solve this problem. I came up with a hypothesis. I said, look, if we as an industry can point to or develop a standard for authoring model objects that represent different building systems and scopes of work in a model, then we can easily define how estimating can be performed, and not just downstream in the design development stage where you have a really detailed model. But I felt like if we could create this standard, then we could be performing model-based estimating all the way back into programming and conceptual design, which I had been doing with profilers. So to me, it all kind of made sense. I just needed to get out of my head and onto paper, right? And then by doing that, we would be providing the industry a great tool, a standard, a guide that they could use, whether they had extensive model-based estimating experience or not. We'd be providing them a tool to use to do this. So shortly after that, I remembered that in 2010, kind of that time frame, the BIM Forum organization had started the development of the LOD specification. And over the last 10 years, you know, the LOD spec has grown to become that industry accepted standard for model authoring. And so I reached out to Will Eichard. This is back in like 2018. I reached out to Will Eichard, who's a friend and who has also been with the BIM Forum organization. He was one of the original authors of the LOD spec itself. And I presented this proposal to him. I said, here's what I think could be done to solve this problem. He liked the idea, and he is the one that really encouraged me to start the task force with the BIM Forum. So I give him credit for giving me that space and that opportunity to do that. So that's kind of the reason, that's how it came about. And then what has happened since 2018 is what I'm really, really excited about. So what we did in 2020 was we formed the task force. We recruited as many people from the industry as we could get excited about it. And then we started working. So we broke up into some subgroups underneath the task force. We kind of had this core group level that would serve as a sounding board, and kind of a larger group that we could present our ideas to and seek some feedback and approval. And then we had some sub-working groups that were actually doing the work. And as a result of, to make a very long story as short as I can, as a result of all the work that we did last year, we published the first ever draft of this Estimating with BIM guide. It's the first thing that I've ever been able to find out there. And it's designed to accompany or supplement the LOD specification. So we're not replacing that. We're actually saying, hey, if you take our Estimating with BIM guide and marry it with or use it in conjunction with the LOD specification, you've got a great practical guidebook for how to accomplish model-based estimating. So really excited. That was published as a draft for public comment in December. It's out there on the web. You can go find it under the bimforum.org website. It's under a section called Estimating and Scheduling. And you know, to be fair, it's only a start. It's a very preliminary first take, but I think it's a great foundation that we can build on, and that's what we're going to do this year. So
that's awesome, Brent. That's really incredible and really amazing to hear you talk about that. It just sounds so exciting. wanted to kind of add on to that. So, you know, you can come up with the draft, it's out there for public consumption, and you talked about having groups that give y'all feedback that help you bounce ideas off of. What's been the feedback? Like, what have you been hearing since that's been published?
Well, so it's only been out there for technically, what, 3 months. And part of what I'm doing at the beginning of this year is starting to kind of evangelize and let people know that it's out there. So, you know, I'm putting it on LinkedIn. We're going to do some webinars this year like this one to try to help raise awareness about it. And I'm really encouraging people to use the guide in its preliminary form as a way to start creating some case studies so that we can really test it and see you know, how it's working out and where the value is, where we need to focus our attention on it. But just as an example, I started a project about 3 weeks ago and intended to use it as a case study. And so I employed the principles that we've defined in this guide. I was able to estimate 96% of the cost of this project from the model. That's huge. And it was both surprising to me. I didn't quite expect it to be that high. At the same time, it was kind of like, well, yeah, duh, that's what you're putting forth, is this principle that this can be done. And so it was really affirming to me too, that not only does this idea sound good, it actually does work. So super excited about that. Yeah.
That's incredible. So Brent, you know, it's pretty cool that, you know, you saw this need, and it kind of sounds like, you know, it was an area that was sort of being overlooked, right? But you came in, you saw the need, and, you know, took the initiative to tackle it, to come up with a solution that so far it sounds like it's going to do what you're hoping that it does. Can you kind of talk to two pieces? So the first being, what else do you hope to accomplish with the Estimating with BIM Task Force? And also, are there other areas that you're already kind of seeing that maybe you don't have the bandwidth to tackle, but you hope or want to encourage others to tackle?
Definitely. Yep. So through the task force, I hope to accomplish a few things. Number one is, I mentioned that the BIM Forum LOD spec was started in 2010 or thereabouts, plus or minus a couple of years. And for a while there, it was gaining a lot of popularity. I kind of personally feel like it's lost some of its prominence in our industry later on. And so I kind of hope to, by pointing to the LOD spec as something we're building on top of, to kind of bring an awareness of it back to the surface again. Because I think that it's an under-referenced resource that our model authoring teams could be using right now. It's a really simple concept. If you've never looked at the LOD specification, it's very simple, it's very practical. It basically breaks down, when you're going to begin modeling a project, think through the level of development of each of the objects that represents the scope of work, so that you're not over modeling with information you don't need at a concept design stage, and you're not under modeling for things you need at a design development stage, for example. So thing number one is to just raise awareness, so to speak, of the BIM Forum's LOD specification. The second goal of this year, or of this task force, would really be around raising awareness of this new Estimating with BIM guide, and encourage teams to start to use it, start to provide us feedback, think about the concepts that are being presented in it, and test them out. The third goal that I think I could probably say with the task force would just be to advance model-based estimating in our industry, and to help create that distinction that we need around what is model-based estimating and what is 5D, or I'm kind of calling 5D integrated estimating. Because you know, just to be really candid, Melissa, with you for a moment, I've invested a pretty significant part of my career in this thing called 5D, right? And I really want this to be my legacy when I leave the industry. I want to feel like I've accomplished something with respect to advancing these concepts. So that's important to me at just a personal level, something I'm really passionate about. But also, I think that the industry, that this may be debatable with some, but I really feel like the industry is not going to be able to advance in a meaningful way until we transition to model-based workflows. We talk about the productivity issue in the construction industry all the time. In fact, it's so overused as an example, but it's a fact that the construction industry lags behind most other industries in productivity, in terms of digital transformation and all that kind of related content. So in my opinion, and this is a pretty strong statement, but everything, all other productivity enhancements and innovations in this industry stem from having good, scalable, replicable, model-based workflows. So I think it's that important. That's why I've become so passionate about it. And then maybe the last, to answer the second part of your question, which is there's only one me, and I'm doing as much as I can, and I would love to do more. Where do we need help? So the task force with BIM Forum was actually set up to be the estimating and scheduling with BIM Task Force. So there's a second component there around model-based scheduling workflows. And we're really light in that area. We don't have a lot of expertise on the task force that come from our scheduling group or scheduling subject matter experts. So what I want to do this year is try to grow that side of the task force, bring some subject matter experts in that have scheduling expertise, because the same thing that we've done for estimating with them, we want to be able to do with scheduling. And some people often correlate 4D with scheduling, which is really that, the three-dimensional modeling element tied to time as the fourth dimension. And so those two really can go hand in hand. At the same time, we're defining the standards for what needs to happen in order to support model-based estimating. We could be doing the same thing for scheduling. So that's an area that I see as a need. There's a group out of the UK that I've been talking to here recently called the 4D Construction Group, and they're kind of like a BIM forum for the UK for scheduling for 4D. And so I want to look at partnering with them and collaborating with them and seeing what we can do to help fill that gap with our scheduling expertise, because they've already made some headway in that area, and we may be able to collaborate pretty well. So yeah, how's that sound?
Amazing, Brent. Honestly, like that's incredible. Cool. The work that you're doing and the vision that you see, honestly, moving in the future. And speaking of the future, obviously a lot of exciting things are happening in pre-construction. We're kind of bouncing back from 2020, getting rocking and rolling. You've already accomplished so much with this task force. What are some other things coming up in this year in the world of pre-con that you foresee happening and that you're really excited about?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So obviously model-based estimating, right? Model-based estimating is one of the trends that I hope to get behind and push and make sure that we're continuing to pursue that as an industry. Another one is, without a doubt, historical cost. We've seen historical costs come to the surface in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years. We've started to see that become more of a trend, more of a buzzword. But it's a real deal. It's a real issue. Historically, we as contractors have had, enormous amounts of cost history data, but it hasn't been accessible. It hasn't been available to us short of spending a week, mining through Excel files or whatever other estimate files we have. So this idea of I want to capture and aggregate our cost data. I want to put it in a database in a format that we can then mine it for analysis purposes and quick recall and that kind of thing. That's gaining a lot of traction. A lot of companies have already started going down that path, and I think we're going to continue to see that, because that's kind of like, man, when you look back over the last 20 years where we have failed, it's like, wow, I can't believe it's taken us to 2020 to get to this point where we saw enough value in that to actually pursue it, right, in a meaningful way. And then in terms of just other trends in pre-construction, one thing I see as historical cost comes online, as we move more to model-based estimating, I really see the role of the estimating team, the pre-construction team, transforming from, I don't mean offense by this, but from a glorified quantity surveying role, right, to a bunch of professional people who count things for a living, to something much more critical in terms of the value that we provide to a project. We're going to transform ourselves, our roles, into these professionals who provide. We're the subject matter experts when it comes to cost knowledge and the value that we can provide to a project in terms of analytical capabilities. Spending less time counting things and spending more time doing true analysis. A lot of estimators are really, really smart people with great math minds, and we're not using the analytical capabilities that exist there because we don't have the time to do that. And then just becoming a real collaborative team member that helps projects succeed. And we've got great problem solving capabilities as well. So if we can move away from the mundane manual tasks like counting things and invest that same time into problem solving and analysis and those kind of things, our role is going to change, it's going to shift, and we're going to take a much more prominent seat at the table of a project and be a much more valued team member.
And Brent, could not agree more with that. I absolutely think you hit the nail on the head. There's so much opportunity for pre-construction to become more than what it's been perceived as, right? And
Yeah.
it's incredible that you're doing so much work to spearhead that and help change that perception. Super important work. But before we wrap up, one of the things I want to touch on really quickly, you mentioned that you're going to be doing some more webinars around model-based estimating. Where can people go to find those, or maybe even go ahead and register for those?
So nothing's been scheduled yet, unfortunately. I've spent more time than I should this beginning of this year, laying some groundwork, building the task force team again, and that kind of thing. So I'm going to shift here in March and start to get some things scheduled. We hope to do one through the BIM Forum. We hope to do one through perhaps DBIA. I hope to do one with the 4D Construction Group out of the UK. If you haven't met James Bowles, he's one of the people that I've been in contact with, and we've talked about doing a joint webinar as well. So nothing's been scheduled yet. I will use my LinkedIn page to announce things like that, and hopefully you guys at Beck Tech will what's the word?
Promote.
Promote. Thank you. Yeah, promote those as I get them identified. So.
Okay, awesome, without a doubt. So, well, everyone who's on here listening, if you want to hear more from Brent about what he's doing with this initiative, please follow him on LinkedIn or reach out to us. We're happy to put you in contact with him if you want to know even more. As you can see, he'll talk your head off about it. And also just want to let y'all know that we are going to be having another webinar on March 17th, same time, 10 a.m. CST, with Justin Weatherby of Gilbane. We'll be talking about streamlining estimating workflow with him. So please go to our website, sign up for that. You don't want to miss it. Again, Brent, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And to everyone else online, we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Take care.